Hey guys. This is part 6 of What If Naruto was mentored by Kakuzu and became a bounty hunter. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start.
We are pain, that's all. We are God.
Chapter 14, Assault. It took a couple days of travel for Naruto and Fu to reach Otogakure. The lengthy trip could be attributed mainly to the lack of direction the two Jinchuriki had with regard to the Hidden Sound village's precise location. As it was a newer establishment, and placed in a land that neither had previously had any reason to voyage through, it had taken the pair much longer to find the main village than it really should have. In the end, Otogakure's main base ended up being located in the dead center of the country. A simple archway proclaimed the entrance to Oto, and as the Jinchuriki approached it, they were halted by a pair of guards demanding to know their business. "We're here to see, Naruto paused, wondering if Pain actually went by that name inside the village, the leader of Akatsuki? One of the men peered down at him suspiciously. "No strangers are permitted to see Kami-sama. State your names and affiliations, immediately." "Kami-sama?" Naruto mouthed to Fu. She shrugged, but before either could respond, a blue-haired woman appeared in a flurry of paper. The two guards bowed hastily at her appearance, reverently murmuring, "Angel-sama." "Follow me," Konan intoned. "Pain has been expecting you." Naruto and Fu exchanged glances, but followed the paper user through Hidden Sound's entrance and into the village proper. The village itself was relatively unimpressive. Plain brick buildings lined the dirt roads, housing families with no other country to go to. Children frolicked in the streets, overseen by their parents, grime and dust smudged on their faces and clothes. All fell silent as Konan swept across their path, black cloak ruffling in the breeze. "So," began Naruto, "Pain's a god, huh?" "Pain is viewed as the savior of this land," Konan stated blandly. Orochimaru was a tyrant, only interested in serving his own agenda, which focused little on helping the actual citizens of this country. Pain has no such compunctions with regards to helping those who are unable to help themselves. If there are those who choose to view his actions as those of a benevolent deity, then we shall only embrace such accolades. "That's interesting," Naruto mused. Generally, individuals bent on world domination didn't focus on the issues of the little people, often dismissing them as inconsequential. Power was their only aim, in every different facet of its many types, wealth and strength, among others, and it didn't matter who they stepped on to amass it. Orochimaru was a good example of such an archetype. But this, helping the civilians of a nation who had, until recently, only been used to further the twisted desires of a madman? Pain's plans didn't fit the stereotypical model of a power-hungry individual set on conquering the known world. Haruo's words about how Pain would end the rule of the tyrannical Hanzo and Amigakure floated to Naruto's memory. Perhaps there was a more hidden agenda behind Akatsuki's leader's goals? If so, it certainly boded well for the plan that Naruto and Fu were hoping would work. Otherwise their lives were about to be cut dramatically short. Konan led the two Jinchuriki to a tall building which towered over the rest of Otogakure. It was easily several hundred feet high, and looked strangely out of place in the midst of the village's otherwise level, urban environment. "Pain is waiting for you inside," Konan informed them. Then, without another word, she separated into a storm of paper sheets. "Here we go," Naruto sighed, pushing the door open and leading Fu into the building. It was rather plain inside, with a series of stairs ringing the interior of the construct and spiraling up beyond the pair's field of vision. "That seems unnecessary," Fu commented, gazing at the stairs. "Probably to discourage civilians from reaching their god," presumed the blonde, his tone carrying a tinge of sarcasm. "Very tedious, though." He turned to his fellow Jinchuriki. "Wall hopping? After you." Naruto pumped chakra to his legs and leapt upon the wall. He rebounded in a backflip and hit the opposite side of the building, Fu following close behind. The pair jumped from wall to wall, performing a variety of acrobatics until they reached the top. Standing with his back to them, overlooking the Hidden Sound from a large opening, was the orange-haired form of Pain. He turned at the sound of his guests' feet hitting the steel of the top floor. Silence reigned as each party observed the other. Oda looks nice, Naruto offered finally. It has made progress, Pain noted, but there are still things which require improvement. He stared at the two for a long moment. I must admit, I'm mildly surprised that you came here. Naruto quirked an eyebrow in what he considered to be a fair imitation of Kakuzu. Oh? Yes. Two Jinchuriki coming willingly to the headquarters of an organization they know to be hunting them for their biju seems incredibly foolish. Fu tensed, and Naruto moved in front of her slightly, bringing his hands together to more easily form seals. Such an action speaks volumes of either your stupidity or your arrogance. Pain turned around and crossed his hands behind his back, returning his gaze to the village below. However, given that Kakuzu does not seem like the type to tolerate a low intelligence quotient, and it is unlikely that you actually believe yourself capable of claiming victory over an opponent immeasurably more skilled than yourself, I can only deduce that neither of those assumptions is correct. He turned to face his visitors. So why did you come here? Kakuzu said you wanted to speak to us, Naruto replied, mustering up more bravado than he felt. Though it was hard to tell from Pain's words, it was entirely possible he had just led himself and Fu to their deaths. That is true. You must have a great deal of faith in your mentor's guidance to come to a place so fraught with danger. Naruto shot a quick glance at Fu, as if trying to corroborate what they could say about Kakuzu. I wouldn't quite phrase it like that. Kakuzu believed it was important that I speak to you before committing to action, Pain stated smoothly. You see, it is my desire to utilize the combined power of the 9 biju to create a monopoly on war, and eventually dominate the world through the continued blood and strife. Your sacrifice would not be in vain. If that's the case, don't you think you should take advantage of us before extracting the biju? Pain stared at the blonde, prompting him to continue. I know that your organization requires a large amount of funds in order to enact your plan, and you should know that Kakuzu raised us to be bounty hunters. You propose to work towards Akatsuki's goals, Pain extrapolated. However, even assisting in our plans does not preclude you from the inevitable. Both the Kyuubi and the Nanabi are required for my intentions. One orange eyebrow rose minutely. What sort of reciprocity do you expect to exist from this partnership? Naruto shrugged. Just to live a little longer before our supposedly inevitable sacrifice. A pause, then, you've recently acquired a bishop and a rook, he pitched, referencing, cleverly, in his own mind, Kakuzu and Hidan, which means that your main force is complete. Now, in your quest to capture the biju, we can either be your greatest opposition, he let that thought linger, or two of your pawns. I'm no genius, but even I can see which option serves you better. You do offer an intriguing proposition, Pain allowed, taking a measured step forward. But tell me, he continued, slowly raising his hand, palm facing the two Jinchuriki, and using his power over attractive forces to pull the children towards him. Naruto and Fu struggled against his power, bending their bodies to resist the intentionally diluted strength of the Bansho Tenin, but slid forward regardless. What is stopping me from capturing you here and now? Naruto grunted as the force of Pain's technique increased, pulling him closer to the man. Instinctively, he activated the futon, Repusho, but the violent wind palm did nothing to halt his movement. Okay! He shouted. The tug on his body faded after a couple of seconds, and he placed a hand over his heart in an attempt to slow its violent pounding. Behind him, Fu was also breathing heavily, and Naruto spared her a look that indicated Pain's abilities were far beyond anything he had imagined. Absolutely nothing, he deigned to reply, solemn. Only the fact that you didn't kill us when you had the chance before we left to find Hidan made me think that you couldn't, or maybe didn't want to. Pain continued to eye Naruto with an expressionless facade. If you so desire, he said at length, then I have no issue with utilizing your talents for Akatsuki's resources. In return for allowing you to maintain your freedom, and your lives went unspoken, half of all proceeds you collect will go to Akatsuki. After a moment's hesitation, 50% of all profits was a fairly hefty sum, especially considering the quality of targets he and Fu could actually kill at their current skill level. Naruto nodded. You won't be disappointed. I certainly hope not. LL. He ran. Really, there was no other viable option considering what he had just gone through. The somewhat ramshackle building he had taken refuge in was apparently haunted, if the hoarse voice from nowhere and random whip-like things were any indication. Such a combination had driven him to a sort of nervous breakdown, and he had quickly abandoned his shelter for the night in favor of camping outdoors. Far, far away from the spooky building, a block of earth zoomed past his shoulder, and he turned to unleash a blast of wind at his presumed pursuer. Gazing at the path he had traversed, the light of the moon only revealed a smoky trail of dust swirling in the breeze. Paranoia's grip tightening around him even more, he dashed further into the thicket of the land of grass, using wind to boost his speed until he was panting laboriously. So caught up in running, he was unaware of the low-hanging vine which blended perfectly into the darkness. It looped around his neck, snapping it almost effortlessly before he could even question its existence. His body crumpled to the ground. Uzumaki Naruto jumped from the tree he had been perched in, a long thread of jiangu unwrapping from around his target's neck and disappearing back under his skin. Fu appeared in short order, crouching next to their victim and poking him with a finger. "That was surprisingly effective," she commented. "I can't believe this guy fell for such an obvious ruse." Her blonde companion merely shrugged. It was rather shocking just how many Nukenin were labeled as such for the most minor infractions. Naruto had expected the majority of them to be powerful shinobi with the capacity to handle themselves in most situations. This one, like several of the others he and Fu had tracked down and killed over the past several months, was merely a chunin whom his home village had discovered trading intelligence to foreign entities, and had escaped before being jailed. Information was powerful, but it also lent credence to the idea that most spies were not ideally suited for combat scenarios. "We definitely got the right guy," he assured, pulling out a flyer he had nabbed on their recent trip to the hidden sand. Ishikawa Hiro, formerly of Sunagakure. How he rose to chunin, I'll never know. The better question is how he escaped from Suna in the first place. Ever since the failed invasion of Konoha, Suna's been struggling to recuperate from their losses. With the Kazekage and his family dead, plus the loss of the Ichibi, Suna's been so embroiled in inner turmoil that it would be simple for any level of shinobi to leave the village. The blonde pulled a scroll from his pocket as Fu lifted the body, allowing him to unravel the scroll on the ground. A series of circles was inked into the parchment, several of them inscribed with names. Fu laid Hiro's body over the next empty circle, and Naruto performed a few quick hand signs before placing one palm upon the corpse. It disappeared in a cloud of smoke. "How's Kamigenso?" he asked, referring to the chameleon, one of Shiromari's sons, who had posed as the secluded building. "He's fine." Disappeared as soon as the target was out of sight. "Good." He wrapped up the scroll and placed it back into his pocket. The scripture was a remarkable example of Orochimaru's genius. Pain had given it to them before they had departed Otogakure, claiming that it was something he had found in one of the Sanin's labs and that it would be useful for their undertaking. It was a sealing scroll designed specifically to hold corpses, inscribed with extra seals to prevent decay of the contents sealed within. "We should visit an exchange point soon. I want to see how much profit we've turned." "Sounds good." They took to the trees, heading for one of the small tree forts they had created throughout the elemental nations for the purpose of having bases of operations. Both were caught unaware by the attack. A block of wood shot out from the trunk of the tree Fu was jumping from, catching her in the side and punting her deep into the forest. Naruto turned at her yelp, but the branch he was on wound around him and threw him violently to the ground. He landed with a muffled oof but only managed to lift his head before wooden pillars sprouted from the earth and encaged him. "What the hell?" he muttered. "Fu! Your companion is preoccupied," spoke a voice from the shadows. "You're the only one I'm interested in, Kyubi Jinchuriki." Naruto blanched at that. Few people should know that contained the nine-tailed demon fox, let alone want to target him for it. He briefly toyed with the idea that Pain had reneged on their arrangement and sent one of his flunkies after him and Fu, but then discarded it. Only Pain, Tobi and Zetsu had abilities that Naruto was unaware of, and even though manipulating trees could be something the plant-like Zetsu might be able to do, the voice which had spoken didn't sound like either half of the plant man, nor did it sound like either of the other two. Besides that, if it was Akatsuki, they certainly would have been interested in restraining Fu as well, which this person apparently had no intention of doing. That meant there was a new player in the game. Great, Naruto huffed mentally, just what I need. Someone else interested in me. Like a group of S-class nukenin wasn't enough. Kami clearly hates me. He rapped his knuckles against one of the pillars of his prison and started in surprise. No way. It can't be. Who are you? He demanded. A figure stepped forward from the shadows. He wore gray chest armor over a sleeveless black bodysuit, complete with arm guards and black gloves which went past his elbows. Across his back was strapped a sword, and a white porcelain mask, with a vaguely cat-like design, with red and green markings covered his face, leaving tufts of brown hair sticking up above the mask as his only visible, physical characteristic. He was gripping his right wrist with his left hand, the right one held palm out to Naruto with the character "Force It" inscribed on it. You may call me Tenzo if you so desire. Naruto's eyes narrowed. Anbu, Konoha Anbu. Tenzo said nothing. Even so, this should be impossible. With the exception of Tsunade of the Sannin, the Senju line is extinct, and she doesn't even have the Kekkei Genkai of the Shodai Hokage. Mokutan shouldn't exist. The brunette remained silent, and the Jinchuriki mentally cursed the mask the man wore. It was frustrating to never see Kakuzu's facial expressions. Not being able to see this man's was even worse. I'm right, aren't I? There's no other ability in the world that can manipulate trees and produce wood from nothing. You're quite astute, was all the Anbu said. Shit. Naruto was well and truly screwed. If Kakuzu, who knew how much stronger than him, hadn't been able to defeat the might of the Shodai Hokages would release bloodline limit, what chance did he have? That wasn't to say that this Tenzo fellow was as strong as Senju Hashirama, that was highly doubtful, but he was still in possession of an otherwise extinct Kekkei Genkai, and was good enough to be in Anbu. The odds really didn't look to be in his favor. Experimentally, he formed a blade of wind along his arm, the tip extending a couple inches past his fingertips. He had thus far neglected replacing his wakizashi, though he had recovered his futon and sueten hearts, and slashed it across one of the wooden bars. A mere splinter was carved from the prison. Naruto released a strangled gurgle at the lack of damage the sharpest of the elements did to the legendary Mokutan ninjutsu. You won't be able to free yourself from my Shichuro no Jutsu through conventional means, Tenzo informed him. It's now time to return to Konoha. Not until I'm ready to destroy it, snarled the blonde, opting for a different method of escape. By some stroke of luck, Tenzo had neglected to create a floor of wood. If they ever met again, he would certainly not forget to do so. With a quick application of chakra, Naruto slipped underground via Doton, Mogirigaku no Jutsu, and began to tunnel a path away from the Anbu member. Sucker. Doton Doriakatsu. The ground around the blonde immediately began to quake before splitting apart to create a series of chasms and fissures. Naruto was hit by the cool night air as his hiding spot was revealed. Holy shit, he managed, wide-eyed. You're resourceful, but you're not going to escape from me, Tenzo stated. Mokutan, Mokusatsu Shibari no Jutsu. His arm transformed into a wooden block and promptly split into a series of malleable wooden tendrils which diverged to surround Naruto. Well, you're certainly not making it easy to do so, he conceded. The wooden tendrils reminded the Jinchuriki of his own flexible kenjutsu, and he quickly called to the threads within his body. Forming the signs of the dragon and then the boar, more out of habit than actual necessity, he hissed, Jiangu, Shiruto Fomu, Jiangu, Soto Foma. Threads burst forth from stitches on both arms, the ones on his left interlacing to form a small shield over his wrist, while the ones on his right wound together to create a sharp blade which protruded a solid 2 feet past his hand. It was hardly a sword in a practical sense, but it worked for Naruto's intentions. He began to fend off the animated wood with the threads, barely managing to escape their grasp. This is really getting on my nerves, he griped. Get him. More threads sprouted from the sutures on his arms and zipped towards the Anbu agent. Several of the tendrils were blocked by their wooden counterparts, but those that weren't were immediately halted by a half-shell wood wall that formed in front of Tenzo with a series of interlocking clicks. Naruto scowled. He hadn't exactly expected that to work, and that wooden wall was probably twice as solid as the blocks Tenzo used for attacking, meaning his odds of penetrating it were unlikely. This guy's gonna be a pain in the ass. Shirigakure no Jutsu. Fu. A thick cloud of dust rose into the air, covering the wide area that encompassed Naruto and his aggressor. Several threads slithered out of the tattoo on his forearm when a gentle hand came to rest on his bicep, working their way up to twine around the new appendage. We need to go, Fu whispered now. Naruto let her lead him through the hiding in dust technique, opting not to drop Jiangu's shield and sword forms until they were safe, though the threads wound around his partner receded. What happened to you? He asked. Got attacked by a Konoha ANBU wearing a cat mask, she replied. He could turn his limbs into wood. Yeah, he must be some sort of lost descendant of the Shodai Hokage. Quickly, the blonde gave his companion a rundown of what he had gone through. Since he was after me, you must have been fighting some sort of clone. How'd you get away? Same way I got you away, Shirigakure no Jutsu. Good thing I've practiced how to move through it, huh? She glanced behind them. If he's ANBU, we're not gonna be able to outrun him. Naruto nodded. Right. He bit his thumb and performed seals. Kuchios no Jutsu. A large chameleon, the same type as Shiromari, if a fair size smaller than the chameleon boss, appeared in front of them. We need to hide, Genso. No problem, Naruto, rumbled the reptile. He opened his mouth and allowed both Jinchuriki to climb in. When they were inside, he shut his maw and his form rippled. Seconds later, Kamigenso was disguised as a copse of trees in the middle of the forest. 5 minutes later, Tenzo passed through the area without any notion that his quarry was nearby. LL. Naruto, you can't do this. Sure I can. Alright, you shouldn't do this. You know how dangerous he is. Even Kakuzu. Kakuzu's not here. We haven't heard from him in 6 months. He took a deep breath at Fu's mildly hurt expression, trying to rein in the bite in his tone. Sorry. I know what we were told, but don't you see that that's why I have to do this? He's my best chance at fixing this problem. It's not that big a problem. Naruto gave her an "Are you kidding me" look. That last nuke killed me. He rubbed his chest uncomfortably at the reminder, adding "get a Suiton heart" to his mental to-do list. When we were chasing Orochimaru, that stupid bitch from Oto got me too. If it wasn't for either you or Jiangu, I'd be screwed. And now with Tenzo out there. He let the thought hang. Even though they hadn't run into the Mokuton user since their initial encounter, the blonde knew the ANBU member wouldn't give up on finding him. I swore to fix this problem, and I will, no matter who I have to go to. I've been putting it off long enough. But... No, he asserted, I'm doing this. Fu was silent for a long moment. Fine, she sighed. Naruto offered his fellow Jinchuriki a wan smile. Don't worry, I'll be fine. In the meantime, he pulled out the scroll they used to seal bodies. Here. You should keep up with our assignment, while I get this whole thing worked out. She took the proffered item and dropped it into the cylinder on her back. You'll be careful, right? Of course. Naruto grunted as Fu threw her arms around his neck and captured him in a hug. He patted her back awkwardly, unsure of what to do in such a situation. Hey, it'll be alright, he assured her quietly, as if trying to convince himself of the same. Take care of yourself, he added when she pulled away. I'll meet up with you once I'm done with my training. I'll hold you to that. With one last look at him, Fu turned and disappeared into the trees. Naruto watched her go before making his way into the nearby cave. LL. Uchiha Itachi was many things to many people. The terms prodigy and genius had been used by both his family and the higher-ups in the Hidden Leaf during his youth. After the massacre of his entire clan, barring his younger brother, he had acquired the titles S-Class Nuke Nin and member of Akatsuki. He was often described as being intelligent, emotionless, and dedicated. But one thing Itachi was not was easily surprised. Which was why, when Uzumaki Naruto entered the cave he had been using as a hideout while Kisame was out performing his own mission and asked for the Uchiha's assistance with breaking Genjutsu, the former Leaf Shinobi was caught flat-footed. That wasn't to say that he showed such a reaction. Years of acting like he had no personality had taught him to temper any impulse to react outwardly. But the mere fact that he was surprised was an impressive feat in and of itself. And he wasn't quite sure how to respond to such a request. Itachi had plans? Or, perhaps more accurately, he had plans. Not one of which involved training a recently turned teenage boy in the illusionary arts, even if it was how to dispel rather than cast them. But then, things hadn't quite turned out as well as the stoic man would have liked. The destruction of his flesh and blood had certainly not been an assignment he had ever thought he would receive upon joining ANBU. It wasn't something he regretted. He had had quite enough of what war he had seen in his short life, and his family's planned coup was sure to start another, but it also wasn't something he had enjoyed carrying out. Even then, he had had one stipulation to the heinous act of massacring the Uchiha clan, that his little brother Sasuke would be kept safe. That, he could admit, was a somewhat selfish request on his part, given that he had planned on having the younger Uchiha kill him somewhere down the line. Given the habit Itachi had gotten into after becoming a renegade with referring to his younger sibling as foolish, he was almost embarrassed at how easily his agenda had been derailed. Hindsight was always 20/20. Such a phrase was especially ironic when the referred-to party possessed the Sharingan. Itachi had accounted for any internal conflicts he had thought would accost his brother. The Sandaime Hokage had given him his word that Sasuke would remain safe. Danzo had been threatened and blackmailed to leave Sasuke alone. The villagers' adulation of the Uchiha clan would ensure that Sasuke wanted for nothing while within Konoha's walls. And despite all that, Uchiha Sasuke, last of the loyal Uchiha, had been killed by external forces. By a Jinchuriki no less, one of the targets Itachi's organization was hunting. Irony struck again. Itachi wasn't entirely sure how to respond to the news. When it had been reported during the Ichibi sealing, all heads had turned to him in expectation of a reaction. True to form, Itachi had given them nothing, but that wasn't to say he was unaffected. All of his plans for his younger brother, for his family's retribution, were for naught. Everything he had done thus far, massacring his family, protecting Sasuke, planning his own death, had been derailed. The only thing that was going right was his protection of Konoha from Akatsuki, more specifically, from Madara. And now, such a goal was meaningless. Konoha had not upheld its end of the bargain and protected Sasuke. What reason did Itachi have to continue actively defending Konoha? Itachi gazed at the blonde in front of him with an outwardly disinterested gaze. Sasuke was dead. There was nothing he could do for his beloved younger brother except hope that he was at peace. The way that Naruto had asked for training reminded Itachi of the days when Sasuke had done the same thing. Perhaps he couldn't help his brother, but this boy was different. From what he had observed during the blonde's training with Kisame, he had great potential. Naruto was also the Kyuubi Jinchuriki, which was, ironically, Itachi's target. Training him to be stronger meant that he had a greater ability to defend himself, which meant that Madara would have more difficulty getting his hands on all the Biju. While supporting the Hidden Leaf was no longer a priority on Itachi's personal agenda, anything that inhibited his ancestors' plans, which were sure to have negative repercussions the world over, could be considered a correct course of action. Cause and effect, Itachi thought. The situation looked to be win-win. Uchiha Itachi had failed to protect his family, failed to save Sasuke, failed to give his flesh and blood the retribution they so deserved. He would not fail Uzumaki Naruto. Let us begin. LL. Naruto brought his hands together into the ram's seal as a gigantic ball of fire descended upon him from the sky. Kai! The conflagration vanished as his chakra interrupted Itachi's own. Good, stated the Uchiha, inflection its usual monotone. Megan, Jigakukoka no Jutsu is a good example of a destructive, if obvious, B-rank genjutsu. However, you would do well to remember that some of the more dangerous illusions are far more subtle. The blonde nodded, trying not to let Itachi's words go to his head. Kakuzu had never really given him blatant praise, and even though Itachi's voice never wavered from its flat delivery, Naruto took the man's simple statements as pride in his improvements. Idly, he wondered how weird it was that he could somewhat understand the subtle idiosyncrasies of emotionally stunted individuals. Are you ready to continue? Yeah. Very well. Nien Shouja no Jutsu. White feathers drifted across Naruto's vision, causing the blonde to start suddenly. Even as he recognized the technique as the one used during the Chunin exams, his limbs began to feel heavy and leaden. He fought the drowsiness that overcame his body, telling himself that it was just the pull of the illusion, that the sluggishness wasn't real. Forcing his arms to move, Naruto brought his hands into the ram's seal. Keikai, he muttered. Nothing happened, and he forced himself to tighten his focus. Kai! Still nothing. His chakra flared wildly as he struggled to break free of the genjutsu. Kai! The feathers disappeared, the lethargy left his body, and Naruto became aware of the fact that he was sitting on the floor. Itachi looked down on him impassively. Not the most judicious application of chakra I've ever seen, but it will suffice, Itachi said. Congratulations. You now have the capacity to dispel genjutsu. That's it? Naruto asked, moving to stand. He could hardly believe that the past 2.5 months of struggling through one illusion after another had finally reached a conclusion. His major weakness was no longer a liability. For the most part, affirmed the raven-haired shinobi. That was an A-rank genjutsu. Despite your initial struggle, you managed to break it. The next step would be S-rank genjutsu and Kekkei Genkai-induced illusions, either of which you are likely to run across. Except for you. There was a pregnant silence as Naruto's words were digested. The fact that Itachi was designated the one to track and capture Naruto had been an understood weight between the two of them, though either had brought up the topic until now. Yes, Itachi granted at length, except for me. I will warn you, he continued, much to his companion's surprise, that the genjutsu abilities of the Sharingan are unsurpassed. Should you find yourself in confrontation with any S-rank genjutsu users or Kekkei Genkai similar to the Sharingan, I would suggest fleeing. Such ninja have ways of making you question the very fabric of your reality. Also, be aware that you broke these illusions with the knowledge that they were placed upon you. In the heat of battle, you will not be so lucky. The opponent will not allow you to have foreknowledge of the fact that you are ensnared in an illusion, or several. Naruto nodded in understanding. He bowed slightly to Itachi before turning to leave the cave, but then twisted his head to glance at his temporary tutor. Tell me, he prompted, do you actually use any of the genjutsu you used against me? No. Those are all more commonplace illusions that you might come across in your travels. There was the most minuscule upturn of his lips that Naruto thought might be Itachi smirking. My personal collection of genjutsu has a certain flair to it. Before the Jinchuriki could ask what that meant, the Uchiha separated into a murder of cawing crows. The blonde watched the birds fly away. He whispered a grateful, thanks, Itachi, to the cave, and then walked out. From the darkness of the cave's corner, Itachi watched his temporary pupil leave. Naruto had come a long way in his training, going from a highly illusion-susceptible ninja to an adept dispeller. That he had been willing to approach a known adversary to correct his most glaring weakness spoke volumes of his desire for personal growth, to prove himself. Naruto was no substitute for the Sasuke that Itachi had grown up with and loved, the Sasuke he had forced to hate him, to come kill him, who had died, but perhaps that was okay. Itachi was now a different person from the one his brother knew, and Naruto was another person unto himself, incomparable to Sasuke. He had been given a second chance to oversee the growth of another young mind, to make up for what he couldn't be to Sasuke. Sasuke shouldn't have died. Naruto didn't deserve to die. Itachi would do everything in his power to prevent that from happening. LL. It didn't take long for the blonde Jinchuriki to find his female counterpart. Fu had apparently taken a more relaxed approach to bounty hunting during his training period, staying in the nearby vicinity and capturing whoever crossed her path rather than actively seeking out targets. Naruto wasn't sure Kakuzu would approve of such a methodology, but perhaps that was okay. Kakuzu had more than one screw loose, and any differences that he and Fu had contrary to their wayward mentor was probably more of a boon than a loss in the long run. He wasn't sure how to react to this new hugging phase Fu had apparently entered, though. Physical contact was not something he was very used to. The green-haired girl released him and took a step back. Sorry, she offered sheepishly. I was worried that you might not come back. You should have more faith in me, Naruto exclaimed. The extra dose of bravado wasn't necessary, but truth be told, the blonde was slightly surprised that he had left the Uchiha with all his faculties intact. Still, there was no point in worrying Fu needlessly with that tidbit of information. So where to now? I figured you should choose, since you've been cooped up for so long. Naruto mused that offer over with a quiet hum. He was still missing his Swate and heart, which was a bit of a hindrance in the grand scheme of things, considering how adept he was getting with the liquid element. How about we find someone so that I can restock? Sounds good. Water again? Yep. Fu began flipping through the bingo book. How come you never want a katan or right on heart? If it were me, I'd definitely want to have one of the more destructive elements. It's not that I don't want them, Naruto admitted, but our situation means that we've gotta survive with what we know. I don't really have the means or time to learn to use either of those elements right now. Even Naruto wasn't so blind as to dismiss the fact that, while Kakuzu hadn't done a very good job of training him outright, the former Takinin had at least set the groundwork for Naruto's nature manipulation abilities. Maybe in the future I'll be able to master them, but for now we should stick with perfecting our current bags of tricks. His companion nodded her understanding. A devious grin worked its way onto her face. Naruto briefly entertained the idea that Kakuzu often wore the same expression underneath his mask when he was being particularly sadistic. Wanna go to Taki and wreak some havoc? Someone wants to take a chance. Fu shrugged. Might as well live a little, right? And they've got plenty of Suiton hearts to take. We can consider it an early birthday gift in Kakuzu's honor. Really early, since his birthday will still be 2 months away by the time we get to the land of waterfalls. We'll make a party of it. There was a brief pause, followed by the quiet admittance, I miss him. So do I. Let's go then. We've got some traveling to do. LL. Kakuzu now knew, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that when he eventually died, and it was when, not if, given that Kakuzu didn't believe he was immortal, he was going to hell. And not for any of the obvious reasons either. It wasn't because he enjoyed inflicting pain upon others, or that he hunted and killed people for both sport and lifestyle choices. Nor was it due to his complete lack of regard for human life, going so far as to take a young child and guide him along a path to become his carbon copy, tainting his innocence in the process, though those were all good reasons. No. Kakuzu was going to hell because to have been paired with Hidan on a permanent basis, all other karmic deities had to have abandoned him. It was as simple as that. Pain had a rather sick sense of humor if he considered Hidan his ideal partner. During the 14 months of travel with the silver-haired man, Kakuzu had been driven to the brink of insanity and back. Multiple times. Objectively, a view Kakuzu was finding harder and harder to maintain, the Jashinist was a good compliment to him, tactically speaking. Hidan was quite obviously a masochist, which matched well with his own sadism, though the fact that the younger male also took pleasure in his own pain somewhat dampened the joy Kakuzu took from it. Unfortunately, that was about the extent of what Kakuzu could tolerate about the man. Hidan was annoyingly talkative, dissolving into zealous rants about Jashin, angry tirades about Akatsuki's slow progress, and heated condemnations regarding Kakuzu's obsession with money with little to no prompting. The former Takinin had used the man's inability to be quiet to his advantage, learning about the origins of Hidan's technique throughout their long journey, in spite of the fact that he found his partner's lengthy diatribes rather annoying. Apparently, Hidan's abilities stemmed from a successful experiment archived in some ancient Jashinism scrolls. As long as he had a sample of his target's blood, the pain and damage from any wound Hidan was inflicted with was shared with his opponent. It went well with the man's masochism and made dodging attacks less of a necessity, but otherwise the practicality of it had struck Kakuzu as somewhat lacking. When, in the middle of a battle, would Hidan have time to form the Jashinist symbol on the ground with blood and then get more blood from the opponent to pull off the cursed ritual? Kakuzu chose to pointedly ignore the fact that his partner had already pulled off the technique against his pupil. The ex-waterfall shinobi was secretly shocked at how often Hidan successfully trapped someone in his curse. Then his surprise always changed to annoyance at the length of the man's post-mortem rituals. Kakuzu viewed those as nothing more than a huge waste of time. Even worse was the Yugakure Nukanin's continued touting of his immortality, as loath as Kakuzu was to use the word. Unfortunately for his personal philosophy, as it stood, the old shinobi had no other explanation for Hidan's extraordinary resilience. Even discounting the evidence that Hidan repeatedly killed himself when in the midst of his curse or rituals, Kakuzu's own attempts to permanently silence the man had proved fruitless. They were accidents, of course, most of the time, anyway. After all, how was he to be blamed when Hidan's eccentricities pushed him into a blind rage? But the thread user had tried everything. Burning, drowning, decapitation, he had even yanked his partner's still beating heart from his chest. Nothing worked. Pain was truly a twisted man. Kakuzu was tempted to take a crack at the man just to enact some form of vengeance for the hardship of putting up with Hidan, but being on Akatsuki's leader's shit list was counterproductive to his own position, not to mention Naruto's and Fue's. Naruto. Kakuzu hadn't given his student much thought in recent months. For all he knew, both Jinchuriki were dead, and had been for a long time. Kakuzu's life for the past 14 months had been a repetitive cycle of bounty hunting, turning in corpses, and traversing the elemental nations looking for hints as to the whereabouts of either the Nibi or the Rokubi. Hidan's caterwauling, as Kakuzu had taken to thinking of it, while lacking the distinctive finesse and wit of Naruto's, had nonetheless filled in some of the space the blonde would have if they were still traveling together. All told, the silver-haired man was, personality-wise, a decent stand-in for the Kyuubi Jinchuriki, if a more obnoxious one. Though the fact that Kakuzu could use all of his powerful ninjutsu without having Hidan die or bitch about watching his aim, as Naruto would have been wont to do, was an upside. The oxymoron that was the mercenary's series of traveling companions was truly baffling. "Oh, Kakuzu, are we there yet?" "Speak of the devil." The former Takinin looked up from his map. He and Hidan had been wandering the countryside of some of the lesser countries in the hope that they would come across the rogue Rokubi Jinchuriki, assuming that he was still alive, while also searching for the Nibi Jinchuriki. The lands of sound, Orochimaru had apparently gotten the daimyo to rename the country, the damned egoist, hot water. And Frost had all been thoroughly scoured for any clues as to the whereabouts of the two Jinchuriki, though Kakuzu had been forced on at least a half-dozen different occasions to stop Hidan from rampaging throughout his former home, citing the lack of any worthwhile bounties as a waste of time. The bounty hunter thought that if the Rokubi vessel was in hiding, a lesser country would have been the most logical place to look. Any Jinchuriki still alive and loyal to their village was more likely to belong to one of the hidden villages of the 5 great shinobi nations than to one of the smaller ones, Fu being the exception rather than the rule, which had led the pair north into the land of lightning. Kakuzu had been somewhat reluctant to enter the major nation, knowing that remaining inconspicuous, especially with Hidan as a companion, was far less likely the closer they got to Kumogakure. He wasn't afraid, the idea was rather laughable, especially after surviving Orochimaru, but information gathering required a far more subtle touch than the come, seek, kill, leave stratagem that was bounty hunting. After weighing the pros and cons and deciding that traversing the land of lightning at some point was inevitable, the pair had entered the nation's western border with the land of frost. It hadn't been long before they had come across an outpost village, which Hidan had quickly proceeded to ravage. At the mercenaries' behest, Hidan had stopped short of massacring the Enter village, leaving a single Kumo Chunin alive to interrogate. The Jashinist curse ritual had come in handy then, with Hidan torturing the man with his masochism until the Cloud Shinobi had cracked. Kakuzu had considered it a stroke of luck that the Nibi Jinchuriki was actually a Kumonin, with a personal sanctuary located not comparably far from their location. The man's cooperation had been rewarded with a swift death. Apparently, Hidan found the 5-day trek unbearably lengthy. His whining made Kakuzu actually miss the companionship of his blonde student. I must be getting senile to wish for that brat's company, he realized hourly. He crested another of the land of lightning's innumerable mountains and looked at the landscape below, Hidan lagging behind him. Yes, Hidan, he stated, we have arrived. Nestled among the feet of several tall peaks was what Kakuzu presumed to be some sort of shrine. From their distance, It was hard to make out any details, but atop the building was the rough design of a blue cat head. We should exercise caution, Kakuzu warned. We are unaware of how well the Jinchuriki is guarded, and it would be unwise to. Yahoo! Kakuzu could only stare as Hidan slid down the mountain, scythe dragging behind him and dislodging rocks and debris. Dust was kicked into the air as the silver-haired man descended upon the shrine. Incur unnecessary trouble, finished the former Takini needlessly. Hidan cannot die. You have tried before with no success. He cannot die, he chanted mentally, trying to quell his temper. I am going to kill him. He leapt after his partner, long arms trailing behind him. As he got closer to the ground, he could already see Hidan preparing to engage a couple of Kumonin in battle. Kakuzu performed 3 quick hand signs. Katan Zukoku! The cloud shinobi immediately scattered to avoid the scorching blaze, but Hidan, with his back to his partner, was quickly engulfed in flames. His angry screeching could be heard from even where Kakuzu was, causing the tall Nuke-nin to chuckle darkly. Whoever said revenge was a dish best served cold clearly had no affinity for katan ninjutsu. By the time he reached the shrine, Hidan had already returned to swinging his scythe aimlessly, screaming expletives while doing so. Kakuzu shot his arm out at a shinobi sneaking up on the silver-haired man, grabbing him by the throat and reeling him in. Is the Jinchuriki inside? He intoned coldly. I'll tell you nothing. Kakuzu snapped his neck with barely a thought. Shinobi with principles, he remarked, disdain dripping from his voice. I applaud your dedication, but your lives are forfeit. Hidan was standing in one spot, preparing his ritual. Kakuzu rolled his eyes. Such a waste of time. Katan Hibashiri. Streams of fire raced along the ground, encircling the cloud shinobi and rising to prevent them from escaping. Kakuzu, you asshole, these heathens were going to be sacrificed to Jashin-sama. I could care less. Your target is most likely inside. Futon Kamikaze. A massive gust of wind blew through the area, catching the flames and swirling them into a fiery vortex. The running fire/divine wind combination was a watered-down version of his Jigaka Erasure, usable when Kakuzu was too lazy or felt it unnecessary to drag out the wind and fire hearts from within his body. The sooner we capture the Jinchuriki, the sooner we can move on to other goals. You mean collecting money? His partner accused. All I want to do is spread the tenets of Jashin-sama. How long till this fucking plan of Akatsuki's takes effect anyway? Kakuzu didn't respond. Instead, he watched the blazing whirlwind he had created die down, leaving the charbroiled corpses of the Kumonin visible on the ground. In all honesty, he was still unsure as to the timeframe of Akatsuki's plans, let alone what the organization's actual endgame was or how it would take place. Still, he was supposed to be the smarter, senior half of this pairing. He wouldn't be able to live with himself if Hidan figured out that his partner knew only marginally more than him. Come, he ordered instead, moving towards the shrine's entrance. I have other things on my agenda. You just want to go on one of your godless money hunts. Without dogma, existence is meaningless. Kakuzu sighed silently. This was one of the repetitive, cyclic arguments he and Hidan frequently engaged in. It was mind-numbing and aggravating, nothing like the stimulating, and dare he say, amusing, banter Naruto and he exchanged. Once again he was struck with the thought that he missed his blonde disciple. Pushing that introspection to the back of his mind, he opened the shrine's sliding doors forcefully just as a set of doors opposite him did the same. The kunoichi standing across from them possessed dirty blonde hair held in a ponytail of bandages. She wore a black and lavender top with a cloud design on the right breast, and deep blue, borderline black pants with the same cloud design on each leg. A red sash adorned her waist, and bandages were wound around her arms from bicep to wrist, ending in black, fingerless gloves. Who are you? She demanded, posture defensive. This her Kakuzu? The nibby bitch? The kunoichi across from them tensed at the title of the biju. Kakuzu's eyes narrowed at the motion. It would seem so, he affirmed in a bored voice. Let us see your dogma reward you when you are not allowed to kill your target. Come on Kakuzu, what did you have to go and say that for? Jashin-sama doesn't appreciate blasphemy. He requires death and destruction. You know that telling me I can't do something just makes me want to cast aside our instructions and go on a fucking rampage. Our objectives are everything, Hidan, and they are clear. The Jinchuriki must be captured alive. I don't know who you guys are, interrupted the Kunoichi, but I swear on my name, Niyujito of Kumogakure, that you will die here today for your transgressions. Faye, she clearly doesn't know the tenets of Jashinism. The only sin I must repent for is not killing her. If she came along willingly, then. Hidan, shut up and look. Yujito was crouched on the ground, blue and black flame-like chakra spewing forth from her body. It settled into the form of a giant cat with two tails, eyes, one green, one yellow, staring at the pair over a mouth of razor-sharp teeth. I guess that's a no on the negotiations then. Do you even have brain cells? Kakuzu deadpanned testily. Hey! I thought we were supposed to be fighting the Jinchuriki, not this thing. What gives? Apparently she has the ability to transform into the Nibi. The former waterfall shinobi stared a moment longer before turning to his partner. Have at it. Oi, you're not gonna help me? The Nibi no Nikomata is your assignment. Besides, you frequently whine about my interference in your ritual. I am only heeding your desires. That's not it, and you know it, asshole. The Nibi's giant flaming paw came down on Kakuzu, crushing him and shattering the wooden floor. You deserve that, you money-grubbing bastard. Oh, Hidan uttered as the Two Tails turned its attention to him, and exhaled a massive fireball. He skipped back through the door and shut it behind him, setting the scythe defensively in front of him. The shrine exploded, sending Hidan skidding a fair distance backwards, his weapon's blood-red tips scoring the ground. Heh, I might be in some trouble here. Oi, Kakuzu! Get up! You couldn't have died that easily. Suetun, Baku Sui Shoha. A wave of water taller than the Nibi crashed into the Biju from the direction of the temple. Amidst the evaporating hisses of the ninjutsu against the cat's flaming chakra, the sound of the Biju yowling in surprise could be heard. I was going to leave the challenge of subduing the Jinchuriki in your less than capable hands and enjoy observing the outcome, Kakuzu intoned, irritation clear in his voice, but this situation calls for a more refined hand than you are capable of. Although the mercenary's cloak was rumpled and possessed several rips and scorch marks courtesy of the Nibi, a quick activation of the Earth's spear technique had saved him from any real harm. I could take this thing, boasted Hidan, but you're just gonna fight it 'cause it stomped all over your ass. Your mindless posturing is aggravating me. Shut up before I kill you. TCH, like you could. Hidan ducked to avoid a swing from the Nibi's paw which would have decapitated him. Whatever, let's just get this over with already. Says the one who requires assistance. Kakuzu raised a wall of water to intercept a series of flaming, rat-shaped projectiles. He immediately turned the liquid into an offensive form, activating another Suetun, Baku Sui Shoha, to draw the Nibi's attention to himself. Hurry up and make yourself useful. Hidan finished disconnecting the lower two blades of his scythe and overlaid them upon the largest one. Now the blood-red curves were stacked from largest to smallest at the end of his weapon, creating a thicker, single blade. He twirled the scythe experimentally as large earthen walls rose up to box in the Nibi. There were very few situations where this form of his patented weapon was useful, but it would come in handy here. Now that I'm prepared, I'll show your wrinkly ass the power Jashin-sama grants to his most faithful. Your god should give you powers that take less preparation time. The Nibi broke free of its confines, sending masses of earth flying in all directions. Kakuzu, expecting something like that to happen, was ready with his arms crossed in front of his face and the earth spear technique active. He grunted as two flaming paws crushed him in their grasp. Hidan laughed. Maybe you should have powers that don't suck. Kakuzu spat a Suetun, Mizurappa, into the giant cat's face, causing it to screech in anger and release him. Maybe you should do something to prove you have some worth, he growled at his partner. Fine, I'll save your worthless ass. The silver-haired man jumped into the air and swiped at one of the Biju's writhing tails with his scythe. A yell split the air as the single blade of Hidan's weapon sliced through the appendage. In its triple-bladed form, the Jashinist scythe was designed for drawing blood from a human opponent. However, the scythe had been crafted with a number of tricks for a handful of more unusual situations. By combining the blades into a single, stacked form, the weapon was capable of cutting through chakra as easily as it normally cut through flesh. Indeed, a small piece of fiery, blue and black chakra flickered on the tip of the curved blade. Hidan landed on the ground and brought the scythe to his mouth, swallowing the Nibi's chakra. The skeletal outline of his curse form appeared as his skin turned pitch black. This was too easy, he cried gleefully. Jishina-sama, accept this sacrifice in. Hidan! Kakuzu snapped, hands flying through seals. The Biju had turned its attention to the Jashinist, but Kakuzu's chakra forced the water from his previous attacks to rise up in a geyser and doused the fiery feline before it could maul his partner. You talk far too much. Quit wasting time and use your damn ritual before I leave you to fend for yourself. Words I never thought I would speak. As Hidan withdrew his retractable pike and stabbed himself to get the blood required for his ritual, Kakuzu unbuttoned his cloak and threw it far to the side. He would need to run interference to keep his partner from becoming the Biju's target, a position he could fulfill much easier with more adversaries for the Nibi to fight. With a thought, the futon and right-on hearts were extruded from his back and went to work firing their respective elements at the cat. While Kakuzu kept the feline distracted, Hidan was busy forming the Jashinist symbol on the ground. Against his normal opponents, the silver-haired man would target bodily locales that would hinder movement, cause copious amounts of pain, or were immediately fatal. With chakra serving as a stand-in for blood, the cursed ritual didn't cause pain, but instead released the opponent's chakra from whatever point Hidan hit. It was a rather useful ability against a creature made up entirely of chakra. The ritual complete, Hidan spun his pike between his fingers and then stabbed into his thigh, avoiding the bone. In front of him, the Nibi screeched as the chakra composing its hind leg dispersed into the air temporarily, causing it to collapse. Hidan laughed maniacally as his partner took advantage of the Biju's weakness and fired a water/lightning combination attack at the cat. He stabbed into the other leg as the Nibi climbed to its feet. It took several minutes of constant self-mutilation for the Biju's form to shrink as its chakra was siphoned away, leaving only the panting Yujito in its place. Despite her exhaustion, her nails sharpened into long claws and she turned to stalk towards Hidan. Kakuzu's body flickered behind her and caught her in the water prison technique. Unable to face her captor, she glowered hatefully at Hidan. I would prefer to not hold this jutsu for an extended period of time, Kakuzu stated dryly as his wind and lightning hearts returned to his body. Ah, quit your bitchin', Kakuzu. Hidan plunged the pike through his stomach until it poked through his back. Inside the sphere of water, Yujito collapsed as the rest of her chakra reserves left her body. It is done, Kakuzu observed, releasing the ninjutsu and allowing the girl's body to hit the ground. Now we can move on to more important. What are you doing? Hidan twisted his head to glare at his partner from his flat position on the ground. I must beg for Jashin-sama's forgiveness for leaving the bitch alive. You should consider repenting for all of your godless money hunts. Kakuzu stared at Hidan as if he had gone insane, which, for Hidan, probably wasn't too far off the truth. I will do no such thing. Hidan, engaged in his prayers, didn't respond. The former Takinin released a long-suffering sigh and sat down on a nearby rock. He would contact Pain through the rings and report their successful capture of the Nibi Jinchuriki, and then he would plan their next course of action. Hidan released a long moan of what Kakuzu presumed to be pleasure. Maybe he should attack a temple next, to vent his frustration with religion? The fire temple was said to be run by a monk formerly of the 12 ninja guardians. He would be worth a hefty fare, and would hopefully provide an interesting challenge in combat. Decision made, he prepared to send a mental missive to Akatsuki's leader, but then paused. He was going to attack a temple and kill a monk. A ninja monk, but a monk nonetheless. There was no question about it. He was definitely going to hell. Chapter 15, Loss. How long does it take to get to this fucking place anyway? You'd think it wouldn't take so long to get there. Hidan, Kakuzu ground out through gritted teeth, shut up. Bite me, you old bastard. One would think you would be more grateful for this opportunity to spread your religion to a sect of non-believers. Why do you continue to whine? They will learn of Jashin-sama's greatness through the pleasure that will be our shared pain. Annoying zealot, Kakuzu muttered as Hidan continued to blather on about heathens and repentance. We've been walking for 3 weeks. Are you sure we're going the right way? Your senile mind probably forgot which way we're supposed to be go, Ichi. Faster than Hidan could react, Kakuzu had spun around and launched a blade of wind at the silver-haired man. His left arm now lay on the ground, blood dripping from the gaping wound in his shoulder. That hurt, asshole. Kakuzu looked away and continued walking through the Land of Fire's woods, ignoring the plethora of epithets Hidan screamed at him. While the other man's voice was grating to listen to even in the best of moods, the mercenary always felt a little better by venting his temper on his shorter partner. Besides, it wasn't like the Japanese didn't deserve whatever Kakuzu did to him. After figuring out how to mentally contact Pain and inform him of their successful capture of the Nibi Jinchuriki, Kakuzu had queried into their next set of instructions. He had been told that Setsu would be along shortly to retrieve the girl, but that the ceiling would have to wait until Sasori and Deidara finished investigating a lead into a sea monster in the land of the sea. Kakuzu had then notified Pain of his plans regarding the high bounty at the fire temple, and after Zetsu had appeared to take away the Jinchuriki, he had lured Hidan on the quest with the promise of a religious massacre. Put this damn thing back on, and Kakuzu, are you listening to me? That was assuming, of course, that Kakuzu didn't magically find a way to just kill Hidan before they got to their destination. Your pathetic bitching is so loud that I would not be surprised to find a group of Kirigakure's oinin listening to you, Kakuzu retorted. If you would just be quiet for the first time in your life, I will reattach your arm. Hidan grumbled a low string of curses directed at his partner, but Kakuzu found them easy to tune out. Getting out of the land of lightning and into the land of fire had taken a little over 2 weeks, during which Hidan had, quite predictably, complained virtually the entire time, and traversing the forest to where the fire temple was located had filled the rest of the time. Kakuzu released a quiet sigh. He missed the days of traveling to kill people all by himself. After a short time, the pair walked through a break in the trees to find a winding trail leading up a mountain. The dirt path turned into a wide staircase that begged entrance to an impressive set of metal double doors, statues of demonic figures guarding the temple. Kakuzu gazed up at the structure before them, analyzing it, before turning to Hidan and holding out his hand. Your arm, he intoned, a tinge of regret in his voice. That had been the most peaceful journey he'd had with Hidan since the beginning of their partnership. Ha, I knew you'd see things my way. Kakuzu held the severed limb up to Hidan's shoulder, and allowed a tendril of Jianggu to stitch the body part back in place. Do not get the wrong idea. I could quite easily leave you behind in this venture, but perhaps appeasing your insufferable habits will stave off the rather aggravating sound of your whining for a time, he stated pointedly. Hidan rotated the newly reattached arm in its socket. TCH, you just don't want to admit that you need me. Hardly, Kakuzu deadpan. They walked up the stairs, Hidan boasting of his skills while Kakuzu ignored him. When the duo reached the top, the mercenary said, before you start your bloodbath, remember that the head monk should remain recognizable. I want to collect the price on his head. Hidan stared at the giant double doors. Yeah, whatever. So how do we get in so I can begin offering my prayers to Jashin-sama? I don't think they're just gonna open these giant-ass doors. Kakuzu's fist darkened and hardened as he activated Doma. We create our own opening. With a single punch, the fire temple's renowned sealed iron wall dented and broke, blasting off its hinges. Then hell rained upon the monks of the fire temple. LL. Danzo was not pleased. Considering how well his tenure as the Godame Hokage had gone thus far, he was probably overdue for something to go wrong. That didn't mean he had to sit back and accept it though. Things following the invasion of the Sand and Sound had fallen into place surprisingly smoothly. Danzo had tightened a noose around Sunagakure as punishment for their part in the invasion, forcing them to make reparations for any damages incurred despite their decreased economy. The discoveries of the Yondaime Kazekage's death and the Ichibi Jinchuriki's disappearance had further weakened the Hidden Sand's stability and strength. There had been some political backlash when the bodies of the Kazekage's children, Temari and Kankuro, had been found in the forest just outside Konoha's walls, but as there was no proof that the Hidden Leaf had had anything to do with them, and in fact, had had no part in it, the matter had eventually passed over. Sunigakure was now reliant upon Konoha for its continued survival. The Wind Daimyo's outsourcing of missions combined with the Sand's lack of leadership had placed them on the brink of civil war. While the Hidden Sand retained its title as one of the 5 great shinobi nations, it was really more a subsidiary of the Hidden Leaf, one which Danzo kept a wary eye on. Even if Suna was weakened, such a situation only made its shinobi more desperate, and desperate people did desperate things. Danzo wouldn't put it past some of the more ambitious ones to try something against Konoha in retaliation. Granted, given that the invasion of Konoha had been the Hidden Sound's idea, something that had been revealed after much interrogation, and therefore Orochimaru's, Danzo highly doubted Suna would try anything, but it was better to be prepared for the unlikely than to be caught by surprise. Danzo's goal of uniting the world under Konoha's banner seemed one step closer to reality with Suna under his thumb. Information on Oto had been rather scarce for over a year. Orochimaru had been a non-entity for close to 15 months, ever since the invasion had ended, and given his close dealings with the snake Sannin in the past, Danzo was used to knowing the man's movements. He was tempted to deduce that the renegade Sannin was dead, but knowledge of the man's resilience tempered the impulse to declare it definite. Still, lack of contact with the Hidden Sound, as well as the disappearance of several of his liaisons sent there, pointed to the fact that Orochimaru was not the one running the main village. That was worrisome, but Danzo was unwilling to spend the resources to conduct a raid of the place at the time. Especially with the situation now presenting itself. "The fire temple has been attacked?" he affirmed. "Yes," conceded the monk kneeling before him. "I had just returned from guard duty when 2 men wearing black cloaks with red clouds departed with Chiriko-sama in hand. The temple was in ruins." Akatsuki. Given that the Land of Fire had no Jinchuriki, Tenzo's monthly reports were less than fruitful on that front. Danzo could only assume that the criminal organization was collecting bounties, information he had gleaned from Orochimaru during his tenure as a member. Chiriku was a former member of the 12 Guardian Ninja and was likely worth a fair amount. "Fetch me Sarutobi Asuma," he commanded to the ANBU hidden in the room. 15 minutes later found the bearded Jonin standing in front of the Hokage, his usual cigarette absent. "You wish to see me, Hokage-sama?" "Yes." "What is the price on Chiriku of the Fire Temple's head?" Asuma looked taken aback, but he rallied himself and replied, 30 million ryo. His eyes narrowed in suspicion. "Why?" Danzo stared the man down, trying to decide the benefit to telling him, if one existed. Finally, he said, "The Fire Temple was attacked by a group known as Akatsuki. Chiriku has been taken. Intelligence would suggest that it is because of the price on his head." The Hokage turned his attention to the monk still kneeling on the floor. "I will send out a team to assist at the temple, as well as one to track the attackers." The monk bowed his head. "Thank you." Then he left. Asuma immediately leveled the Hokage with a serious look. "Hokage-sama, I would like to take my team to follow the trail this Akatsuki left." "Your team, Sarutobi, does not have the necessary mission experience to take on this assignment," Danzo informed him. "In addition, there are Jonin better equipped to track than you. Your request is denied." Asuma's fist slammed down on the Hokage's desk. "If what you said is true, then we know exactly where they're headed," he stated angrily. "There's an exchange point close to the Fire Temple. If they're after high bounties, I'll be good bait. My head is worth 35 million ryo." Danzo kept his expression carefully blank as his clever mind finalized the manipulations it had started by telling the man about his friend. Asuma was clearly emotional, which was a dangerous mindset for any shinobi. However, he was also a very talented Jonin, not to mention the last surviving member of the former 12 Guardian Ninja, and sadly enough, expendable if things went wrong. "You understand the danger you are putting yourself in?" Asuma nodded, and Danzo continued, "Very well. You will follow Akatsuki and gather intelligence, but Team 10 will not accompany you. Do not engage unless you have a clear opportunity to incapacitate them. I would like to request that Nara Shikamaru accompany me on this mission as part of my team. His abilities are well suited to analyzing a situation and collecting data based on even-minute details." The older man considered his underling's request. Shikamaru had proven himself a genius tactician, and had frustratingly remained out of Danzo's reach for recruitment into Root. In tandem with Asuma, the Nara would prove to be a powerful asset in the field, and perhaps an opportunity would present itself to finally make him join Root. I will allow this. However, your remaining 2 teammates will be my choice. They will meet you at the gates in an hour. Asuma bowed and departed, leaving Danzo alone with his machinations. He didn't trust Asuma to not overstep the bounds of the mission parameters, but with any luck, the outcome would work to his advantage. If things went south, his 2 operatives would keep to the mission parameters. Sai and Shino possessed skills that would be beneficial for the assigned tasks of tracking and intelligence gathering. The artist's skill was only a couple steps below Asuma's, and the Aburaim had proven himself adept in field assignments after taking well to Root's program. Plus, since both had graduated with Shikamaru, even if Sai had been undercover, they would act as effective double agents to keep the mission on track and to report the slightest mishap back their leader, him. Yes, Danzo would get what he wanted from this mission, one way or the other. LL. Fwa. Kakuzu glanced behind to find Hidan holding his nose and gagging. He shifted the corpse of the head monk that was slung lazily over his right shoulder. Problem? This place fucking reeks. It is a bathroom, Kakuzu informed him in a tone that implied his explanation was unnecessary. He knocked on the wall between 2 urinals as Hidan continued to choke on the stench in an exaggerated fashion. You must be too damn old to smell anything anymore. I'll wait outside while you commit your blasphemous acts. Kakuzu watched him leave the exchange point, grateful for the brief reprieve from his partner. Ah, Kakuzu, spoke the voice of Zangiai, sounding mildly surprised. The mercenary turned his green eyes to the bounty exchange master. This is quite a surprise. It's been some time. I have been preoccupied with other responsibilities. Zangiai nodded and opened the door to allow the taller man access. Then this is a strange coincidence. The bounty exchange master stepped aside, allowing Kakuzu full scope of the dark room. Standing by an open cabinet for holding corpses were 2 figures, one with spiky blonde hair, the other with short mint green. Kakuzu smirked. Well, greetings, brats. The pair of Jinchuriki looked up at the sound of Kakuzu's voice. Even in the dim light of the exchange station, the mercenary could see the widening of his blonde pupils' blue eyes. His mouth gaped like a fish's before he found himself able to exclaim, "Holy shit! Kakuzu, you're alive!" "You sound surprised," returned the former Takinin dryly. "Rather, I believe I should be the one reflecting such sentiment." "And yet, you're not," Fu said. "No. Same old Kakuzu," Naruto muttered. "Hey, where's Hidan? Killed him already?" Kakuzu snorted. If only it was so easy. No, he decided to remain outside. His god approves of killing but not reaping the benefits of doing so. He rolled his eyes. The stupidity of such a dogma is truly astounding. Green eyes narrowed at the 2 Jinchuriki as Kakuzu placed Chiriku's body in a drawer Zangiai opened. "I must admit, I am curious as to what the 2 of you have been up to." Naruto shrugged as Zangiai flipped through a bingo book to check the identity of Chiriku. "We made a deal with Pain to do some bounty hunting for him. In return, we get to stay alive. For now." "For now," Naruto echoed. "So, we've been going around the world and capturing bounties to fund Akatsuki." Kakuzu turned his gaze to the body his 2 disciples stood around. "Weaklings, by the look of it," he observed, scorn coloring his voice. "That man is a chunin from Sunigakure, hardly a worthwhile target. Maybe someone should have trained us to be able to take on people with more skill." "We get by with what we can," Fu interjected, placing a placating hand upon Naruto's arm. "For now, it's enough." "Humph. Your standards are lower than they should be." Before Naruto could retort, Zangiai stepped forward with a briefcase and said, "It's definitely Chiriku of the Fire Temple. An impressive catch, Kakuzu. Here's your payment." Kakuzu thumbed through the money with the ease of practice. "With any luck, I will return within a shorter time frame than this last excursion," he informed Zangiai, closing the briefcase. He swung the case over his shoulder and began to head for the exit. It should not be too hard to trick Hidan into killing a handful of high-level targets. His religion might finally be useful for something. Kakuzu. The bounty hunter stopped at Naruto's voice, but remained turned away. It was good to see you again, admitted the blonde. Stay alive, brats, he intoned, walking out of the exchange point. LL. Stupid Kakuzu and his damn money obsession, Hidan grumbled. The silver-haired man was currently seated on the steps in front of the bounty exchange station, waiting for his partner to leave what he considered to be a stinkhole. We never take side missions to just kill people for Jashin-sama, no. They have to be worth something. Money is what makes the world work, he said, pitching his voice deeper to mimic his partner. Bah, the fuck does he know? The former Union made to stand, but found himself unable to move. Hey! What gives? A long blade of chakra came level with his chest. You're going to tell me everything I want to know about Akatsuki, demanded a bearded man whose height topped Kakuzu's, starting with where your partner is. Hidan's purple eyes focused on the sash around the man's waist, the same sash the monk he had killed had worn. Damn, he swore, completely ignoring the man's question, now Kakuzu's gonna wanna stay to hand in your ass, too. The chakra blade thrummed violently and extended, piercing the Nukanin's skin. 2. Where's Chiriku? The bald monk? He was a sacrifice to Jashin-sama's great will. Just like Yobi. The blade doubled in length and pierced Hidan's heart. I don't think so. Letting Hidan collapse on the stairs, the chakra faded from around the man's trenched knives as he turned and walked away. We'll wait for the second one to come out and capture him. From his supine position, Hidan noticed a thick rope of shadow disconnect from his own, the ability to move returning to him. His hand grasped the handle of his scythe and flung it at the bearded man, a mad cackle escaping his lips. There was a shout of Asuma-sensei, and the man spun around, deflecting the scythe with his trenched knives. How are you still alive? Asuma demanded. Jashin-sama rewards those who are faithful to him with great gifts, shouted Hidan, yanking on his weapon's metal coil and bringing it within his grasp once again. He moved to attack, but his periphery caught the movement of a shadow, and he dodged left to avoid it. Then a horde of insects descended upon him, and Hidan swung at them uselessly with his scythe. Gah! Where the fuck did all these bugs come from? That was when Kakuzu stepped out from within the bathroom's shadows. He took in the sight of Hidan flailing around like an idiot, a strip of shadow angling towards him from the roof, and the tall form of a Konoha jonin before sighing. I see your propensity for attracting trouble has struck again, Hidan. Shut up, asshole. Although, Kakuzu continued, green eyes focusing on the sash around the jonin's waist, it seems you lured in quite a big fish. Your religion will finally serve some usefulness. Sarutobi Asuma, one of Konohagakure's elite jonin and a former member of the 12 Guardian Ninja. How fortuitous, to come across a second member so soon after delivering the first. I will enjoy cashing in your head for the 35 million it is worth. Asuma readied his trench knives, the blue chakra of his flying swallow fighting style forming along the blades. Hidan, rather predictably, thought Kakuzu, decided to interrupt the moment. Kakuzu, this is my fight. Stay out of it, you bastard! The bounty hunter stared at the scene before him. Sarutobi Asuma, an Aburame, a Nara. Intelligent green eyes flickered over the tree line, where he could detect a fourth, muted chakra signature. Try not to lose your head, he acquiesced, bored. Oh, he continued, almost as an afterthought, and you should be aware of. A trio of ink beasts, vaguely lion-like in appearance, Kakuzu noticed, erupted from the foliage and assaulted Hidan while he was distracted by the insect swarm. The fourth shinobi, he finished idly. Kakuzu, you unhelpful bastard! The former Takinin paid only half a mind to his partner's screaming and flailing. It had actually been quite gratifying to see his two wayward pupils. Both had grown in the more than a year that they had been apart, filling out as their bodies transitioned from prepubescence to teenaged. They were still young, and the effects were gradual, but Kakuzu figured that given some more years, Naruto at least would strike an imposing and powerful figure similar to his father. Fu would probably always remain slight physically, but there were advantages for a kunoichi to be built as such. Emotionally, Kakuzu couldn't decipher from their brief contact if anything had changed. Naruto still seemed brash, but given how, intentionally, antagonistic their relationship was, such a reaction was probably more of a reflection of Kakuzu's presence than the boy's mental state. Fu, at least, appeared to have retained a level head, not to mention a rather simplistic method for calming her fellow Jinchuriki. The Nukenin wasn't sure how to feel about such a relationship between the two, if Naruto was even aware of it, but their performance seemed unaffected, so he let the thought slide for the time being. There wasn't anything he could really do about it, anyway. Their interaction had done nothing to show Kakuzu what sort of skills the two Jinchuriki had picked up during their separation, though the fact that they were bounty hunting, no matter the skill level of their opponents, boded well for what they had learned on the job. The fact that neither was dead, well, considering how badly a vast majority of shinobi outclassed them, Jinchuriki status or not, it was definitely an impressive feat. Perhaps just as impressive was the knowledge that Pain had listened to his suggestion, and then agreed to it. Granted, there was sure to come a time when Naruto and Fu would be more useful as sacrifices than bounty hunters, but until then, the two Jinchuriki could hone their abilities. There was a minuscule part of him that almost regretted not properly overseeing their training up until their separation, at least, not in the capacity that a normal tutor would have, anyways. Not that he was the epitome of a normal tutor in any sense, but he certainly could have done more than he did. The fend for yourself ideology worked to a point. He was a good example, but he had also escaped his village at the age of 20, giving him plenty of time to work on his abilities in a somewhat safe environment beforehand. Naruto had not had such a luxury, given that there was no one but Kakuzu to practice with, and he had tried to distance himself from the blonde's training as much as possible. Of course, Kakuzu had also thought he had plenty of time to sadistically train/guide/torture the blonde into a fighting-fit shinobi. Being blackmailed by and joining Akatsuki so unexpectedly had essentially foiled those ideas, resulting in Naruto's training being cut short. It would be such a waste to put so much effort into that brat, only to have him die. The former Takinin wondered if there was a way to guide the boy without being particularly obvious about it. Kakuzu, bring me my body. The ex-Waterfall shinobi's musings were cut short by Hidan. Of course. I told you not to lose your head. Very funny, asshole. Are you gonna help me or not? I suppose. Perhaps I should start charging you for my services. Asuma, badly burnt and kneeling on the ground, groaned. Shino, sigh, Shikamaru, keep your distance, but try to restrain the tall guy. Kakuzu watched blankly as a swarm of insects emerged from the Aburame's coat and a pride of lions leapt from the artist's scroll. He casually exhaled a fireball at the bugs, incinerating them on contact, then commanded Jiangu's threads to shoot out from his forearms and rend the ink creations to splotches. Jumping around the shadow streaking towards him on the ground, the S-class shinobi extended his arm to pick up his partner's head and landed next to his body. Without any effort, he lifted Hidan's form and held the man's severed head up to his neck. Suddenly, he felt his own body stiffen, and he glanced over to find the Nara on one knee, hands together in the rat seal and panting hard. The fact that you think you can hold me in your current state is laughable, he commented. He flared his chakra, sending the Nara reeling and forcibly breaking the shadow bind technique. One of his threads slithered out and reattached Hidan's head. You can finish off the cash cow while I take care of the others. Ha ha, fine by me. Hidan split from his partner, hurling his scythe at Asuma and surreptitiously positioning himself in his curse symbol. Kakuzu watched his two opponents. The Nara appeared to be incapacitated by chakra exhaustion, with a bored expression. Feeling something wrap around his legs and crawling up his torso, he looked down to find ink snakes slithering around his body. He hardened his skin, boosting his strength, and flexed, splattering the reptilian constructs. Your antics are no longer amusing. Kakuzu pushed a solid wall of air at the two boys, one collapsing into ink, the other dispersing into the Aburame's Kikeichu. Clever, but it will not be enough. His arm extended into the bushes and grabbed the Aburame by the throat. As the bounty hunter reeled in his capture, his green eyes scanned the area. Should you not rescue your associate? He goaded blandly, waiting for the artist to show himself. Hidan's insane laughter split the air, followed by the Nara's scream of Asuma. Kakuzu looked over to find the Jonin face down in the dirt, blood seeping into the earth. He did something right, for once. Hey, Kakuzu, aren't you done yet? Can I kill the rest? Do what you will. He snapped the boy's neck, but he just dissolved into bugs again and swarmed Kakuzu from head to foot, trying to suck out his chakra. Annoying gnats. Katon. Hidan, Kakuzu, it is time. Son of a bitch. We were just getting to the good part. Hidan, shut up. It is imperative that we follow our orders. Sasori and Daidara's venture to find the Sanbai was unsuccessful. We will seal the Nibi now. Find some place to hold up for the 3 days it will take. We will be there shortly, Kakuzu affirmed, threads creeping out from his skin to disperse the Kikeichu. Green eyes shifted to spy Naruto and Fu exiting the bounty exchange station. Brat, pick up the prize, he ordered. Naruto appeared startled at being addressed, let alone finding Kakuzu still in the vicinity, blue eyes taking in the scenario spread out before him. Come, Hidan, let us depart. Fine, but we're coming back to continue the sacrifice. Then both were gone in a shunshin. Naruto quickly assimilated the lay of the land. That's Sarutobi Asuma from Konoha, he pointed out, and I recognized those guys from the Chunin exams. Sai, Shino, come on! Shouted the boy with a pineapple-style hairdo. We've gotta get Asuma-sensei back to Konoha. Naruto and Fu leapt to surround the downed Jonin. Oh, I'm afraid I can't let you do that, announced the blonde. See, he's worth a fair amount to us, he continued genially, before his eyes hardened like diamonds, and we would be remiss to let him just escape. A flock of ink birds erupted from the forest as a stream of bugs buzzed towards the pair. Fu spat globs of mud at the incoming insects, catching them and weighing them down. Naruto performed hand signs and expelled a volley of condensed wind chakra bursts. Futon, Shinkajioku, he stated, the spray of air bullets piercing through the ink flock. While Sai bombarded the duo with ink creatures, Shino came to kneel beside Shikamaru. While tragic, Asuma Taicho's death should not result in the rest of ours. Our chakra is low and these adversaries are fresh. It would not be advisable to attempt recovery of the body considering our present circumstances. Shikamaru gave Shino an angry glare. I'm not going to just leave him here to Sai looked at his fellow root member, hand reaching for his ink brush after knocking out the Nara. He created a large ink bird and helped Shino lift Shikamaru onto it. Danzo-sama has plans for the Nara. It is important that we bring him back alive. Shino nodded and Sai instructed the creature to take off. Naruto and Fu watched them go. Should we? Fu tried. Go after them? No. They're not worth anything right now. Naruto's gaze went to the body of the bearded Jonin they had protected. A shiver went through him, an ominous feeling of unease racking his body. Ignoring it, he looked at Fu. Let's turn this one in and get back on the road. LL. Danzo sat behind his desk, hands folded on top of it. Sai, Shino, and Shikamaru knelt before him, having just finished relaying the outcome of their mission to him. The latter looked emotionally disturbed, unsurprising considering the news Danzo had just been delivered. Konoha will mourn the loss of one of its most talented and loyal shinobi, he stated. Sarutobi Asuma's name will be inscribed upon the memorial stone for his service to the village. You are all dismissed. Sai and Shino left with respectful inclines of their heads, but Shikamaru remained behind, rising to his feet and staring with intense ferocity at Danzo. The Hokage met his expression with a flat, emotionless look. Something you require, Nara? I want to know what you plan to do about this threat, Shikamaru demanded, voice even but laced with frigid politeness. These two Akatsuki assaulted and killed a Konoha shinobi within the Land of Fire's borders. You can't simply let this action slide. Nor do I plan to. However, I fail to see what my retaliatory plans have to do with you. I want to be included in them. Danzo leveled the Chunin with a predatory look. Your teacher said the same thing before he left on the mission which killed him. I have long held the belief that emotions only lead to bad decisions and sloppy results. What makes you think that I'll permit you, a mere Chunin, to allow your desire for vengeance to get you killed? Shikamaru placed his hands on the edge of the Hokage's desk and leaned forward so he could look the elderly man directed in his eye. Because I know how to neutralize Hidan. You need me. Shino and Sai are good observers, but they can only tell you what they saw. But defeating an enemy requires keen analysis of their speech patterns, movements, tactics, and so on. Danzo passed the boy over with a shrewd eye. And you did that? Shikamaru said nothing. The Hokage leaned back in his chair, lacing his fingers together. Shikamaru was smart and stubborn, and far more useful to him as an ally rather than an enemy. Even if was emotionally compromised, he had a much better idea of what he would be up against than Asuma had. In all honesty, the elderly man had foreseen this outcome as a possibility, even likely. The loss of Asuma was tragic, but the man was also one of Shikamaru's closest associates, not to mention his teacher. In order to bait the Nara, something truly terrible would have had to happen to make him blind to the Hokage's machinations. This has played almost perfectly into my hand. Just one more step. When you return from this mission, he began slowly, you will become a member of my ANBU. The Chunin didn't even hesitate. Fine. Danzo allowed a crooked smirk to cross his lips for the barest of seconds. And so the last fly comes into my web. Before you dissect every facet of the target's abilities, I would like to bring someone in to hear what you have to say. Terai, he barked, and a cloaked ANBU dropped from the ceiling. Find Inu. 10 minutes later, an ANBU in standard uniform, silver hair defying gravity over a dog mask, appeared in the room. After the death of Uchiha Sasuke, the promotion of Sai to Chunin, and Haruno Sakura's return to civilian status, normal people really weren't cut to become the ideal shinobi. Hatake Kakashi had rejoined ANBU and almost immediately had been granted the title of ANBU captain. Danzo had been slightly disappointed that he couldn't rope the man into joining Root, but having him under his thumb as the Hokage's personal soldier was good enough. Inu, you'll be leading an assault team on the 2 targets Nara here is going to describe. He will also be a part of the team. Kakashi nodded, which Shikamaru took as his cue to speak. The shorter one is a man named Hidan. He wields a large triple-bladed scythe attached to a long metal coil, and has at least one retractable pike. His main ability seems to be some form of immortality that makes him immune to what I can only assume is all forms of physical trauma. Danzo raised an eyebrow. You assume? He took a lethal blow to the heart, and was able to talk during and recover from a decapitation, though his body retains no autonomous movement during that time. While other forms of trauma were not attempted, surviving those extremes seems to suggest that any other method would also be moot. Hidan uses his immortality and a curse ritual to link the wounds his body takes to that of an adversary whose blood he has taken. However, the ritual is limited by a symbol he draws on the ground to complete it. Removing him from the symbol nullifies the link between him and the target, provided he remains away from it. You said he can survive decapitation, Danzo prompted, but your phrasing would indicate that he is incapable of recovering from such a debilitating injury on his own. Yes. His partner is tall man he called Kakuzu. He was able to reattach Hidan's head to his body through black threads that also grant him the ability to extend his limbs to great lengths. In addition, he displayed an affinity for both Katan and Futon chakra natures, though the extent of his mastery of those elements is indeterminable based solely upon my observations. Akatsuki is an organization comprised of S-class criminals, Danzo revealed. I would expect his mastery of the elements to be as complete as yours, Inu, potentially greater. You said you had a plan? He asked, returning his attention to Shikamaru. From my observations, I believe I can neutralize Hidan, provided his partner is kept occupied. Very well. Inu, you will lead a team to find and intercept these Akatsuki members. When you find them, eliminate them. Yes, Hokage-sama. LL. Kakuzu stood up slowly and cracked his spine. Sitting around for long periods of time didn't agree well with his advanced age, no matter how fit he was. Replacing organs was one thing, bones were an entirely different matter. Beside him, Hidan rose and rubbed a hand across the back of his neck, rolling it around to stretch the muscles. Man, sitting around for 3 days doing nothing sucks, complained the silver-haired man. Why does that ritual take so damn long? The taller shinobi tossed him a flat look. You have no room to talk, Hidan, he deadpanned. Only 5 seconds to start bitching. It must be a new record. Fuck off, Kakuzu. If I don't offer my respect to Jashin-sama, I might become a damn atheist like you. There are worse fates. I believe it would be an improvement over your current personality. Hey, that really hurts, you know? Besides, where are you going? As we are within the land of fire, we might as well begin exploring it for the Rokubi Jinchuriki. What about those bastards at the bounty exchange station? They were ripe and prepared to become sacrifices to Jashin-sama. Kakuzu craned his neck to stare at Hidan. You really are an idiot. Why would they stay around there for 3 days? No, we have our assignment. If we come across any Konohanin, you can deal with them. Ha-ha! I knew you'd come to see things my way. Now, if you'd give up your blasphemous habit of killing for money, you might have a chance at getting within Jashin-sama's good graces. As Hidan continued to ramble about his god, Kakuzu rolled his eyes. Truly, the cost for appeasing the stupid was a mighty sacrifice. LL. Joro Saban. Futon, Repusho. The violent wind palm blasted away the rain of needles descending from several airborne umbrellas. Naruto spat out the wind pellets of a vacuum sphere, riddling the instruments with holes and making them unusable. Anything else? He asked, returning his gaze to the man across from him. His opponent, a somewhat feminine-looking man with teal-colored hair and purple eyes, scowled at him. You think you've got me beat? Ha! I still haven't used my greatest weapon. He reached behind his back and brought forth what looked to be the hilt of a weapon. Behold! The Raijin no Ken, Naruto finished, bored, the Nidaime Hokage's great sword. How do you know what it is? Naruto finished, enjoying the panic his prey was experiencing. I wonder if this is how Kakuzu feels whenever he sets his sights on a target. Well, I know everything about you, Rokusho Aoi. Defected from Konoha after you had your pupil steal the Raijin no Ken, then joined AIM and eventually became a Jonin. Kinda pathetic, all things considered, having a genin steal a precious artifact in your place. The rest of your past is rather mundane. It doesn't matter, Aoi professed. You're still going to die here. Naruto cocked his head to the side curiously. Oh? That's interesting. I admit that I was a bit surprised to find you in the land of fire. But since you're here, I think this'll be a good test of my abilities against a former Konoha shinobi. He paused, eyeing the sword, then continued, surprisingly, Konoha is willing to pay more for the return of that sword than your body. I'm not one to really help it, but I am rather interested in money. Aoi brought the sword to life, creating a long blade of electricity. Naruto sighed. I guess we do this the hard way, then. Jiangu, Sotofomu, he said, holding out his right hand and letting the threads twine together into a blade. He dove forward as Aoi did the same, the two swords clashing against each other. There was a brief stalemate before the lightning of Aoi's sword pierced the black threads and severed the end of Naruto's makeshift blade. The blonde leapt back and stared at the stub of his weapon. Well, that's problematic. Take this. Aoi shouted, waving his sword and creating an arc of lightning that swept towards Naruto. The blonde held up a palm and blasted away the shockwave with another violent wind palm. I'll kill you! Yawned Naruto, so you said. He ran through a quick string of seals and then held his hands parallel at chest level, palms facing each other, leaving a small space between them. Futon Kaze Jogo. A strong suction built up, with the space between Naruto's hands serving as the focal point. Aoi could do nothing as his body was pulled into the vortex of the technique, the electricity from the mad swipes of his sword overpowered by wind's elemental superiority to lightning. When the rain Jonin was near enough, threads erupted from the sutures on Naruto's forearms and speared into the man's body, the pull of the wind release, wind funnel proving too much for Aoi to escape from. Naruto released the technique, allowing the Jonin's body to drop to the ground. Fu jumped down from her perch on a tree bough high above the battlefield. That was impressive, she commended, moving to pick up the hilt of the deactivated Raijin no Ken. She examined it, running a finger over the relic. Are we really going to return this to Konoha? When no response was forthcoming, the Jinchuriki looked over at her companion. "Hey, are you okay?" Naruto tried to settle the uncomfortable knot of tension thrumming throughout his body, his gaze locked into the distance. "Yeah," he responded, almost mechanically, "we need the money more than the sword, and it's too precious an antiquity for Konoha to ever use it against us." He turned an unusually serious gaze upon the Nanabai Jinchuriki, the same foreboding feeling from 3 days ago haunting him. "Let's seal the body and get a move on. Something's not right." Fu raised an eyebrow, but did as she was bade. Then they took off, silent as wraiths, destination unknown. LL. Kakuzu was the very definition of pissed off. He and Hidan had been, well, the closest to being ambushed that Kakuzu could recount in decades. The Nara had led the charge, 19 ANBU agents flanking him. Dodging the boy's Kageme no Jutsu had been impossible with all of the other people distracting him, but by releasing his hearts to run interference, and keeping the earth one for Doton, Domu, Kakuzu had been safe from most offensives. Until hidden ANBU number 20 had shoved Hatake Kakashi's trademark Raikiri through his defense. That had destroyed his earth heart. Somehow, and Kakuzu honestly found he couldn't be overly surprised, given Hidan's stupidity, the Nara had separated the 2 Akatsuki members, leaving Kakuzu to take on 20 ANBU agents. Given how badly he had been outnumbered, 5-1, counting his 3 thread creatures, the former Takinin had kept up quite nicely against Konoha's vaunted elite, though the fact that they could cover each other's weaknesses and blind spots meant that killing them had proven more difficult than he would have expected. He found it a bit unusual that about half of them were garbed in cream cloaks and the others wore standard ANBU outfits, and that the latter ones were more defensive of their comrades than the former ones. But in a battle to the death, such trivialities hardly mattered. They all needed to die, regardless of what they wore or how they acted. Then, a stabbing pain had exploded in his chest. Somehow, he'd figured, Hidan had cursed him. That had destroyed his water heart. After that, he had recalled all of his hearts in order to protect them. Unfortunately, his opponents had taken advantage of his thread creature's single-mindedness and captured one in a giant earthen construct. It had then been turned into an oven, roasting the autonomous threads to cinders. That had destroyed his wind heart. Now, Kakuzu stood with only his lightning and fire hearts left, both settled within his body. His ultimate form was locked to him, inaccessible since he had last used it to seal Orochimaru. The bounty hunter remained motionless, glaring at the overwhelming number of Konohanins still before him. Cowardly, spineless shinobi of Konohagakure. To even stand a chance against me, they must amass seemingly insurmountable odds. But I will not fall here. I survived against the most feared shinobi of the ages, Senju Hashirama. These no-names will not succeed. It was embarrassing enough that so many had survived as long as they had and were giving him what could only be described as trouble. He was, after all, S-rank, and more than worthy of the title. You will all rue the day you came to confront me. Black tendrils ruptured from his back, spreading out and forming thick tentacles twice Kakuzu's height and length. 7 of the thread limbs surrounded him, tendrils connecting them together to create a spider's weave at his back. More threads spilled forth from his mouth, knocking off his head covering and mask, and forming an 8th limb disconnected from the rest. A bushel of tendrils converged to create a stubby tail of sorts at his back. Die! He hissed, and the limbs went forth, giving the bounty hunter the appearance of a twisted octopus grappling for prey. 5 limbs dove for targets. 2 struck the closest 2 shinobi and skewered them before they could react. 1 ANBU dodged the 3rd limb, and another cast a kawarimi to escape the 4th. The 5th used a massive tree trunk as a shield, but the thread split and caught him in a pincer attack. Unable to escape, he set his body aflame as ANBU operatives were instructed to do. Kakuzu scowled. In his rage, he'd had a slight oversight regarding the ability to restock his hearts with the ones from these shinobi. Jiangu's long-range form sacrificed the extending abilities of his arms and other useful grappling options for brute power and destruction. It was a bit more difficult to control the Kenjutsu's organ-stealing ability with such huge masses of tendrils. The 2 tentacles that hadn't attacked wound around him protectively, shielding his body from an incoming burst of flames. The bull mask that housed his lightning heart appeared in the center of the web of threads, firing a right on John straight up. The Konoha trying to attack from above was speared through the side, a clean hit through his liver. He burst into flames a moment later. That was the 7th 13 left. He glanced up to find a portal of mud about to dump on him. Jumping, he recalled his limbs and using them as wings, sailed away from his previous position. Kakuzu landed, the tentacle emerging from his mouth digging into the earth, and revealing a shinobi underneath. The threads wrapped around him, burrowing underneath his skin and reaching for his heart. The earth closed with a resounding boom, crushing the ninja before Kakuzu could capitalize on his capture. Green eyes glanced around, irate. Most of the remaining Konoha seemed to be garbed in the cream cloaks. You would rather sacrifice your comrade than see him fall into enemy hands. Callous, brutal, intelligent. 3 tentacles of his threads lanced back at a shinobi coming in from Kakuzu's blind spot. The ANBU was rent limb from limb, but an invisible force slammed into Kakuzu's back, shattering the bull mask. A skilled enough futon user that his attacks are undetectable, and a complete disregard for his own life. These ANBU are truly dangerous opponents. But I will not be defeated here. 7 tentacles lashed out, seeking the remaining 11 shinobi. I will kill you all and restock my hearts, and then your village will burn, he seethed, completely enraged. One of the tentacles angled at a stockier ninja, but the man's hands grew to large proportions and caught the threads within his grasp. Kakuzu sent a second tentacle at him, but he caught it with his other hand. The tendrils wriggled in his grip, driving into his hands and drawing blood, but the ANBU held on. A third tentacle rushed to spear him through the stomach, but another ANBU stepped forward and spun, creating a dome of chakra Kakuzu recognized as the Hyuga's Kaiten. Kakuzu glanced around to find more of his thread limbs being restrained. A fourth had a loop of shadow wrapped around it, restraining it. Another was being held at bay by 2 ANBUs shooting bursts of fire and wind in tandem, and a sixth was being boxed in by continuously thicker walls of earth. The Nuke growled, but was momentarily caught off guard by a shinobi appearing directly in front of him, hands flashing through seals. His last mass of threads, the one from his mouth, lashed out and wound around the ninja, reaching for his heart. He disappeared, an illusion in the wind. A distraction. Kakuzu realized, craning around to find the dog-masked ANBU he suspected was Hatake Kakashi a mere foot away, hand crackling with lightning. The bushel of tendrils comprising his tail speared into the man. Then, there was pain as the ANBU took on a blue sheen and discharged electricity throughout Kakuzu's entire body, Jiangu's tendrils acting as a conduit. A right in Kage Bunshin. Paralyzed, the bounty hunter could only watch as the real Kakashi popped up from the ground, hand alight in the lightning cutter. So this is how it ends, he thought as the Raikiri pierced his chest, beaten by mere children. Kakuzu felt surprisingly at peace as his body jerked, the fire heart failing him. As his awareness of what was happening around him dimmed, his green eyes scanned the area, landing on a head of blonde hair on the outskirts of the dead forest. Perhaps my legacy will finish what I have started. Naruto. Kakuzu's body hit the ground, and he thought no more. LL. Naruto led Fu through the land of fire's forest at a fast clip, the leaves present on the trees thinning out significantly as they kept moving forward. He couldn't explain it, but there was an ominous pull in his heart, as if something was about to go horribly wrong. Fu had tried asking what was going on, but the blonde had ignored her, focused instead on pumping chakra to his feet just to get there faster. It was only when the greenery disappeared entirely, to be replaced by the barren skeletons of trees in their decline, that he began to actually feel the trouble. Stop, he commanded, taking his own advice and halting on a bough. Fu stopped beside him, her face a mixture of concern, confusion, and patience. Something's going on over there. Circle around and see if you can get a better vantage point. Don't interfere unless it looks like I'm in trouble. Fu looked ready to protest, but she closed her mouth and just nodded. Without a word, she disappeared. Naruto took off right after. The ominous feeling settled firmly in his belly, making everything seem cold despite the sweat beading on his brow from racing through the land of fire. Naruto burst into a clearing full of activity, surprised blue eyes immediately focusing on his teacher. Kakuzu was surrounded by close to a dozen ANBU members, Jiangu's threads compacted into 8 long limbs which fanned out from his body. With his mask off and one of the thread masses sprouting from his mouth, the blonde became aware of just how terrifying his mentor could be. Just as he began to prepare a jutsu to help the man, an ANBU in a dog mask appeared and shoved his lightning-covered hand into Kakuzu's chest. The Jinchuriki's eyes widened as all the threads surrounding Kakuzu shuddered violently and withdrew into the former Takinin's body with a series of sickening slurps. When the mercenary's form could be seen, his green eyes were wide with disbelief, the shock clear on his naked face. He pitched forward suddenly, and then he began to fall. To Naruto, time seemed to slow down to individual microseconds as gravity took hold of his mentor's body. Could Kakuzu be, had he just been killed? There is no such thing as immortality, Kakuzu informed him one day when he had gotten curious about his teacher's prolonged lifespan, merely methods to inhibit the decline of the human body into death. But Kakuzu couldn't die. He was old, sure, but he was strong and wise in the ways of the world. The most important rule you will ever learn is this: money is everything. The world revolves around money, even hell runs on money. Knew how to survive, knew the tricks of the trade for staying alive in a dangerous environment. My village believed that I did not try hard enough, and punished me for failing in my objective. This blasé disrespect for all of my servitude infuriated and offended me, so I left. I stole Takigaku's most precious treasures, the Kinjutsu Jiangu, and the hearts of the village elders, who did not appreciate my service to their precious village. Apparently not well enough. Had taken Naruto in when everyone else had hated and scorned him. I have never done this before, but your ability to heal and withstand my attack is an intriguing one. If you would like, you can come with me, and I will teach you to properly harness this power. Raised him, trained him. You will learn one of my most useful ninjutsu, a move which may come in handy against the Hyuga you are supposed to fight. Given him purpose. I am going to teach you how to engage in the world's oldest profession, killing. You would be nothing without his tutelage. Spurred Naruto to become greater, despite his unsympathetic, detached ways. There is a reason why you are the only other individual to become imbued with Jiangu. Endured his very existence. I have tolerated your foolishness far longer than I should have, and this childish wordplay and immaturity will cease immediately. I expect you to act like the ninja I have trained you to be. Clearly he is endowed with far more patience than you thought, considering the effort he put into suffering through your continued presence. And had inspired him to become a great shinobi. And that, Kakuzu stated wickedly, driving the water-cutting sword through his target's heart, is how you overcome an elemental disadvantage. He turned to face Naruto. Do not let the potential fear of a handicap hinder your decision to kill those who are beneath you. You clearly still have a ways to go. Kakuzu had watched over him when he had always thought the man couldn't care less. Did your feeble mind ever consider how we stayed in one location, under the noses of the foolish Konoha you escaped from, without ever running into a single one of them? No one else would want such a task. He was honestly the closest thing Naruto had to a father. And now he is dead, by the hands of Konoha, no less. No. Yes. Embrace your anger. How could Kakuzu die? Naruto. Kakuzu threw his bingo book at the blonde, who caught it with both hands, and then offered the duo a slight incline of his head. Humans are weak creatures, highly susceptible to death. Why? Konoha has now taken everything from you. It is time for your vengeance. Vengeance. Kill them all. Kill. Kakuzu's body hit the ground with a muffled thud. The sound seemed to echo ominously in Naruto's ears. From his throat ripped an ear-splitting howl of anguish. Kakuzu! The last thing Naruto was aware of before blacking out was the dark laughter of a voice inside his head as malevolent chakra violently exploded from his body.